When considering treatment options, where do clinical trials fit into the plan?
I think clinical trials are extraordinarily important. The way that I think many of us think about this is we want to continually do better and have our patients continually have improvements. And the only way that we can do that is by bringing forth novel medications in order to gain that extra improvement. Um, as mentioned, all of these small molecule inhibitors, every drug that we have out there started off as clinical trials. And so we were able to gain benefit, and patients are able to gain benefit by taking part in these clinical trials. Not all clinical trial is successful, to be fair, and different types of clinical trials have different scientific knowledge beforehand. So, for example, phase one clinical trials tend to be more experimental. We don't know as much about the drugs. Phase three experimental clinical trials are much more well known. And then there is a bunch in between in terms of phase ones where we know the drug, but we're studying more of a combination. But all of these clinical trials, the purpose of this is to gain benefit. If we didn't have a drug that we believed was going to be helpful, we wouldn't be doing that clinical trial. So while some people may think of these things as experimental, I think of them as rationally evaluating a way to target particular forms of leukemia to gain better responses.
Yeah. If a clinical trial isn't offered, how can patients inquire about their potential options?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to speak to their physician. And, many physicians, if they have clinical trials, they'll know the eligibility, they'll know who is and isn't eligible and why they're not eligible. And that's something that can be easily explained to people. But the second thing is, if there aren't clinical trials available at that institution, then it's important to for the patients to talk to their clinicians and say, is there a clinical trial available someplace else that might be good for me? And many of us field calls from other physicians, from other colleagues who call us and say, hey, I have a patient with this particular disease. Do you have a clinical trial available? And we're always willing to collaborate. The one nice thing about the leukemia field is it's a relatively small field. We all know each other. We all realize that the purpose of this is to make patients better. And so we all share information and we all work together to try to get that accomplished.
Mm-hmm. There are a couple of really good websites available too to find out about clinical trials, correct?
There are, and I think that there are by contacting different institutions that can be helpful, such as the Leukemia Lymphoma Society is a good one. There is a national clinical trials database called clinicaltrials.gov, and those are all very important, but sometimes they can be a little difficult to navigate. And so I think it's always good to go back to your physician or your physician team and discuss these things to make sure that the clinical trials that someone is looking at is actually an applicable clinical trial for them.